Is your timekeeper is presentation session. Before we start, I'd like to read the rules and regulations that need to be complied with the whole event. The time allotted for the presentation session is only 15 minutes. The time allotted for the question and answer session is 5 minutes only and starts when the presenter starts responding. The panel can only start asking questions when the presentation session has ended. The bell will rung once in the 10th minute of the presentation and twice in the 15 minutes of the presentation, marking the end, and the question and answer session will begin. Questions from the panel of assessors should take precedence over other panels. The moderator reserves the right to mute the microphone of the participant during the question and answer session if it is found to have exceeded the time period. Now, let's start the ceremony with the first presentation from Ambilan Moderated from lesson 2 to present.
Assalamualaikum and good morning. I read for our parents and sisters and my friends. I'm Untitled Chapter from PISMP, that's from 2018, and my supervisor is Sidang Selari. Okay, so today I'm going to present about the level of classroom management knowledge among PISMP that's from 2020 teachers in IPG campus Lagi. For background of the study, we know that classroom management skill is an important element that leads towards effective teaching and learning session. Therefore, teachers are predicted to possess a high degree of professional competence. So in this research, I will discuss about the level of knowledge. Okay, so before we go further, I will explain the level of knowledge. Okay, so the level of knowledge is something that someone needs to know, and then for classroom management, I use Freud and investment theory, which covers the three aspects. The first one is the content management, second one is conduct management, and the third one is content management. Okay, as for content management, it comprises the teachers need to know about how to handle the materials, how to handle the lessons, and how to handle the sessions. And for conduct management, it about the teacher trainees on how to handle to resolve the classroom discipline issues. And for component management, it covers the teachers to manage the interpersonal relationship in the classroom. Okay. So the training teachers should master this basic knowledge of classroom management, such as content management, conduct management, and component management. This is important to ensure that training teachers possess a good understanding of classroom management before they enter public education as a teacher. Okay, for the statement of problem, the first one is I found out the level of classroom knowledge that the training teachers perceive from teacher training programs did not correspond to what they should deal with in a real world situation. So, based on my practical based experience, I noticed that most of our training teachers they lack of classroom management knowledge, and they didn't know how to handle it properly. So that's why I come up with this. And according to Ambilan 2018, many teachers do not receive adequate classroom management training prior to starting their teaching careers, and they feel unprepared for the demands of managing student behaviors in the classroom. So, for teacher trainees, they are having difficulties in managing their classroom management. So that's why. Okay, for the purpose of the study, this research paper aims to investigate the level of classroom management knowledge as well as the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by teacher training programs to improve outcomes in our teacher training. Okay, so research objective is the same like research question, so this is one. Okay, so for research question number 1, it is what is the level of classroom management knowledge among PISMP lesson 2, 2018 teachers in ICT campus Ismail? And for the second questions, what is the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by teacher training programs? So for the significance of the research, I conduct this research to raise awareness among training teachers about the importance of classroom management. So we know that classroom management, the classroom session depends on the classroom management. If the classroom management is effective, then the learning session also is effective. And the next one is to assist training teachers in determining their level of classroom management knowledge. So all of us already learn about classroom management, but we don't know what levels are we in. And the next one is to determine the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by teacher training programs. Okay, so this research is also conducted to discover or to find out how effective, how far the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by teacher training programs. And related past researches, according to Shamina 2018, she emphasized that training teachers require adequate opportunity to polish their skills in classroom management apart from intellectual understanding. She said that this not only understanding, but it's not only understanding that's required in classroom, but it is also the teacher training also require an opportunity to polish their skills. And the next one is for the 27. Emphasize that training teachers need to prepare adequate knowledge to teach their pupils, as well as having strategies on tackling the pupils' emotional needs. Next, in this research, I use quantitative design, specifically studying. For population example, we know that population of TESOL June 2018 is 1998 training teachers. And the sample, I use random sampling method. To determine the sample size, I use the Crazy and Morgan table. So from the table, 98 is equivalent to 80. So that's why the sample is 80 branches. Okay. For the instruments used for data collection, I use online questionnaire, which is Google Form. So in this Google Form, there will be 5 sections. For section A, the respondents need to fill out their demography. And then for section B, it covers the content management. Section C, conduct management. Section D, component management. And section E, the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by the teacher training program. So in this Google Form, they will rate the statement based on 5 scheme. And then for the research procedures, okay, first of all, before I conduct this research, I identify the research problem first, and then review the literature such as the past research, and then I specify a research purpose such as the research objective, research questions, and also research hypothesis. And then I begin to collect data, and after I then collect the data, I started to analyze and interpret the data using SPSS. And last but not least, I wrote a report and evaluate the research. For data collection procedures, okay, first of all, the researcher distributes the Google Form to each class representative. And in this Google Form, we already informed the training teachers that the information will be kept confidential and anonymous. And then the respondents are required to fill in the questionnaire, and they need to submit the questionnaire. And after that, the researcher will follow up the remaining respondents to answer the questionnaire. So the data collection procedure took a week to settle. Alright. So moving on to the data analysis procedures. Okay. So the primary data was keyed into SPSS system, and each item in 5 sections were coded accordingly. Section A, section B, section B, and section D. And then the internal validity of each item was then calculated using compact alpha to validate the reliability of the measured variables. So after I calculate the compact alpha, so it is proven that the item is reliable to use. Okay, and then frequencies, percentages, means, and standard deviations were calculated in this in this data analysis, I use two types of analysis, which is the one descriptive statistic to analyze the level of classroom management knowledge, and the other one is inferential statistic to analyze the classroom management, the relationship between classroom management knowledge and the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by disciplinary programs. And then the data was finally ready to be analyzed. Okay, for the data findings, it seeks to answer the research question number one. Okay, for research question number one, what is the level of classroom management knowledge among PISMP test June 2018 teachers in IPT campus Tajuk Misconception? So as you can see in the table, okay, we conduct it into three aspects, which is content management, conduct management, and covenant management. And it shows that covenant management have a higher means compared to content management and conduct management. So all of these, according to the table, so the mean scores obtained for each aspect of classroom management reveal that majority of our training teachers accomplish a high level of classroom management knowledge. Research question number two. What is the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by teacher training programs? Okay, as you can see in this table, okay, it shows a weak significant correlation R 0.92, P 0.005 between the level of classroom management knowledge and the effectiveness of classroom management practice provided by teacher training programs. So I will tell you later in the next slide. Okay, in this discussion. Okay, so with reference to research question one and research question two, it is concluded that the level of classroom management knowledge among the training teacher is good, and the classroom management practice provided also effective. However, the training institutes are still needs to provide the training teachers with proper practice before sending them to school. In conclusion, training teachers may have extensive knowledge of classroom management, but they also require ample opportunities to develop themselves in the areas of content management, conduct management, and communication. So these are a few recommendations for IPGM. The first one is create a platform to encourage training teachers to discuss reflective learners and portfolios in depth. Okay, it doesn't matter if it is a seminar program or anything, as long as it is a platform for our training teachers to discuss reflective learners and portfolios in depth. Another one is prepare the mentor about what they need to observe and guide the curriculum. This is because I noticed that most of the mentors, especially the mentors who never received mentees, they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to observe, what to evaluate. So the PGM needs to prepare a guideline about what they need to observe and guide. And then develop guided practice with feedback from supervisors. Okay, we know that we already have guided practice with feedback, but then we want it to be more developed. And then last but not least, prepare training teachers with case-based learning. Case-based learning is learning based on the case. These cases are generally stories, narrative that includes character or scenarios. It also can be presented in forms of video, simulations, and others. Last but not least, implications. This research will be able to raise awareness among teachers about the importance of having classroom management units. So most of us did not realize this until we go to school. When we go to school, we know that we are poor in classroom management. And then last but not least, as teacher education institution. So by conducting this research, it is hoped that teacher education institutions will be able to improve the classroom management practice among teachers. So I think that's all for me. Thank you.
The ceremony will now continue with a question and answer session. Please welcome the level of assessors to ask any questions to the presenter. Thank you, Mr. Director. Good morning. Thank you, all of you. Okay, I'm Jane. To start with, how do you, when your population is 98, is it include you or not?
No, I'm included in pilot study. Some of the some of my classmates are in pilot study.
Is it you also in the pilot study?
Yes.
No, definitely is a huge bias data. They analyze. And what is your value for your alpha? Okay. When you mention the alpha, then you need to have the numeral to present it. Okay. Okay, back to your slide. I don't remember which one, but I think it's on data finding. Okay, so next, dekat lagi. Okay, lagi. Ada yang you mention apa tadi dia state good.
Oh.
This one. This one. This. What standards do you use?
Oh, this one. I use teachers.
Yeah, true. It does. It does you reveal high level. How you detect that is a high level?
This is the table.
This is great. Give me the situation here.
No, this one is about level. This is 50. Yes.
So you compare the value.
No. All of these are under the same under the same classroom management.
Lepas tu you compare dengan main tu, lepas tu you compare dengan standard apa? You kata high level. What is the source? You say that, oh, okay, that figure means it is high, it is low, it is moderate. What is the source for you to claim it is high, low, it is moderate?
Okay. It is based on the table that for 4.0 above, it is considered.
Who said?
I remember.
Graduated dengan PCCU kan? Next time masa television, masa PhD buat PCCU. Dia tak buat tu. Ini semua kena you need to give complete information. You kata high level, you ikut pada mana pula. Lepas tu, your conclusion tadi apa? Good lah. Tadi kan very good. Tengok balik. Alright. But before I proceed, I would like to highlight this discussion. It's not to find mistakes, but rather to help you improve your work. Because you will be doing your masters and whatnot, so you have to provide with you with the correct information, yeah? Especially when you're doing what we call quantitative research. This kind of thing has got to be very solid. Okay, I know, can you go back to your pilot study just now? How many students were involved in the pilot study?
50.
15. Alright, so you have 15, 98 minus 15?
3. 83.
No, 83. But you mentioned that the sample is 80.
Yes.
What was the answer?
No, it's because I use Quessy and Morgan table to determine the sample size.
Correct. Tracy and Morgan mentions that if you have 98, then your sample should be minimum 80. Alright, but Dr. Pons has mentioned that you should not include yourself. It should be lesser than 98. So you minus that, then you have 83. 83. So you decided to choose 80. How do you choose that 80 students?
It's based on who fills in the question list.
Okay. Now in your thesis, what did you write? And what did you put when you choose your students or your respondents? Did you use the word random sampling?
It's random supplement.
So what you mentioned is your random sampling. Sampai cepat dia dapat, it's not random sampling. Okay? So take a look at that. Right. Next one is your research question number 2. Can I take a look at your research question number 2? What is the objective? To observe the effectiveness. Right here. Hold on. What is the effectiveness? What do you? This is question, right? This is question, right? This is all question. What is the effectiveness of classroom? What do you mean? I found this sentence. What is the effectiveness? When you say what is, it's not. It's not leading to a Pearson correlation. If you wanted to use Pearson correlation, it means that you wanted to find out the relationship. So your research question, your objective is that or to find out the relationship between A and B, relationship between classroom management and what? So here I don't see what relationship you are trying to find out from your research question. What is the effectiveness? I don't see that, and I do not see why you need to use Pearson correlation. So this research objective and research question needs to be reviewed. Alright. I think that would be all for now. Take a look at this data.
Now please welcome the next presenter, Professor for the history is right from Tajuk 1 to present his presentation. Please welcome.
English is undeniable. English is undeniably the most influential and important. It reveals politics, finance, and entertainment. And as such, it is an unincredibly valuable asset to have in your command. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very pleasant day at all. My name is Ahmad Shalal Safwan, and I will be presenting action research entitled Using You Right as You Guys to Improve Year 3 People's Constructing Simple Sentences. Let's go. The first one, background of the study. The study relates to English in terms of education, focuses in aiding Year 3 pupils to construct simple sentences with the help of an intervention named You Right as You Guys. Next, the statement of the problem. The problem can be seen from practical experiences of teaching in Para, to be specific, SK Methodist Girls School Ipoh. Second, discussions regarding the problem among mentors, school teachers, and also peers. And lastly, justifications from past researchers, which I will be stating after this. Next, the purpose of the study. There are two purposes. First, to analyze and overcome the issue of Year 3 pupils constructing simple sentences, obviously. And second, to apply the intervention to boost the effectiveness of teaching and learning, and also to increase the level of effectiveness, and surely students can improve their writing skills by the use of the intervention. Next, the research objective. Okay, there are three objectives. First, to examine whether You Right as You Guys had improved writing simple sentence construction among Year 3 pupils at SK Methodist Girls School. Second, to investigate whether the pupils' simple sentence writing improved after using You Right as You Guys. And lastly, to identify the responses from the pupils after implementing You Right as You Guys. What are the questions? The first questions relate to the first objective. Thus, using You Right as You Guys improve writing simple sentence constructions among Year 3 pupils at SK Methodist Girls School Ipoh. Second, thus, the improvements found in the students' writing skills are results of implementing You Right as You Guys. And lastly, did the students respond to the implementation of You Right as You Guys? Okay, the significance of the research. Okay, firstly, it is significant because we teachers nowadays need to adapt scaffolding learning style in students, which is students start from zero and they climb up by themselves, or student-centered learning. And second, it is also significant because it is stated in the SKP Year 3, page 3, where students need to use correct and appropriate rules of grammar in speech and writing. Okay, let's go to the related past researchers. I have many. I have almost 10, but I will highlight 6. 3 related to simple sentence construction and 3 related to scaffolding. Okay, the first one, stated by Cole and Frank in 2015. They stated that writing has been identified as one of the most essential skills because the world has become so text-oriented. So everything starts from basics, starting with simple sentence and ending to improve to more complex one. Second, their statement, also supported by Lingard in 2016, where he stated that simple sentence construction promotes mastery in many aspects. Some of them, key writing, feature of strategy. Second, it illustrates how it commonly goes wrong in a sentence. Third, show the empowerment of grammar. And last, offers suggestions to read it effectively. And last but not least, Lawai and Adina stated 2019 stated that writing is proven to be one of the most fundamental skills to master in learning a language. It is also considered to be the most difficult skill because it requires several other skills and also the help of some intervention from stage to stage. Next, moving on to the second one, which is scaffolding. Okay, the first one, stated by Patnawi and Artini 2018, scaffolding is the support of core learning and problem solving, which might include clues, encouragements, providing examples, and also modeling. This statement is supported by Daisa and his friends in 2019, where the application of scaffolding will train students to become problem solvers with guidance, thus creating I do, we do, you do. That is showing student-centered learning and therefore resulting in independent learning for the pupils. Lastly, where Viramutu. 2011 stated that when scaffolding is done correctly, then pupils are encouraged to develop their own creativity, motivation, and also resourcefulness. Okay, next, theories. I use two theories. First is live by got skills at reading, and second one is Skinner's operant conditioning theory. Okay, why I chose this? Because first, clearly, the term scaffolding falls under Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And second, Skinner's operant conditioning theory is applied in the intervention where students receive rewards for using language in a functional manner. So in the intervention, students will receive stars and also a hamper at the end of the intervention. Okay, next, my design and also focus. Okay, my design is narrative qualitative design, and my focus, my research focus is first relevance. Okay, why I'm saying this research is relevant? Because first is stated in the SKP where they say that the students have learned calligraphy skills at level 1. Next, they need to develop their writing mechanism to write letters. And lastly, they need to progress to phrases and sentences in the next level. Okay, next, in-researchable. Okay, this research opens a brand new perspective in displaying the higher cost to assist students to have better simple sentence creation. Why I'm saying that? Because the interventions opens opportunity for greater discoveries and innovative methods to teach young learners about simple sentence construction. Okay, next, manageable. Why I'm saying it's manageable? Because it was done in a three-week research with proper planning and also proper selection of samples. It is quite familiar with the samples, was quite familiar with the researcher because they were his pupils. And last but not least, compatible. Why I'm saying it is compatible? Because the intervention uses snake and ladder, interactive slides, and also some videos, just for the sake of helping the students in improving their simple sentence construction. It was also beneficial because it applies ICT because I cannot do it face to face due to the pandemic. Okay, next, the population and sample. The population is 29 year 3 pupils from a mixed ability classroom. This is the number of my pupils in SK Methodist, and I selected 3 year 3 pupils. The selection is based on suggestion from the class teacher and also the assessment from the preliminary test as well. Alright, instruments used and intervention. Okay, pre-intervention and also post-intervention test to answer research question 1 and research question 2. Next, interview. Okay, I want to highlight about interview and observation because it answers research question 3. The interview is specifically because it demands rapid analysis, formulate a hypothesis, and also help me to plan my journey in implementing the intervention to help the students. And also the observation was done in 2 methods. First is direct reactive observation, and second is unobtrusive observation. One I observe directly, and the other one I observe without them knowing I'm observing them. Alright, next. This is the instruments used or my intervention, which is Snake and Ladder, Microsoft Interactive Slide PowerPoint, multimedia, the application of multimedia, and also the visual dice. Some of the participants, teacher, then I press the dice. Okay, that's you mean. You can open up another tab, just press the dice, and also writing sheets. The writing sheets, I've traveled to 3 students' houses, ranging 10 kilometers from my own house. So I need to, from my house, I go and I come back, and then I go and come back to deliver the test or any instruments that need their handwriting, their own handwriting. Alright, the procedures. First, of course, we need to plan. And then second, deciding the objective and questions with the help of my supervisor, Ms. Pratin. Next, choosing my participants during the practical phase, second practical phase. Next, building intervention and modifying the intervention because the intervention was at first physical and then I modified it into online intervention. Next, conducting the research, data analysis, and last but not least, outcome and reflection. Okay, the procedures, I followed action-based model, Dennis and Tajuk, 3 cycles because 1 for each week. So I plan, action, observe, and reflect. For every cycle, I add the first cycle specifically for tenses and verbs. Moving on to adjectives, and lastly, the last cycle is prepositions. Okay, so these are the procedures. At first, I gave them the test, and then I teach them first to give them a clear picture what they will be doing in the intervention. And then this is when I send the sheets, and then I observe them. Finally, post-intervention, I conduct a semi-structured interview. Last, triangulation of data, last but not least, the findings. Alright, data findings, we can see that in post-intervention test, I'll give you an example. In the pre, a participant wrote, on Saturday, we went for a picnic at the beach. Leah and her brother are very happy. Incorrect use of tense. But in the post, my family and I went for a picnic at the beach. Use correct use of past tense. Okay, next for interview, positive feedback given, such as, did you enjoy the game? What do you like the most in the game? And their response was, it was fun. Yes, it was exciting. Very good, very good. Lastly, observation. Okay, observation, I gave out 5 things: frequency to attempt, eagerness, stimulus, competitiveness, and also clarifications. Competitiveness was quite low because it was done one by one. But if it was done in a group, they will be competing among themselves to achieve the prize at the 50th box. Supposed to be 100, but if 100, the box will be like so big, so I need to cut to 50. Alright. We move on to reflection. So I just use a simple SWOT, strength, weakness, and threats, but this is the highlight. So the strengths, as we can see, it improved the simple sentence construction, and then the scale of the intervention also has been boosted. And lastly, of course, it is very significant, the empowerment of ICT. The weakness from the intervention, I can analyze, and my supervisor also said that the lack of accuracy of each data gathering technique, because the research was done so in a short time of span. So I cannot acquire so solid data. Next, limited funds, of course, because using all 100% my money. And then limited interaction because it was done online. Last, the threat is the method of research execution, which should be done face-to-face. And then the lack of researcher's attention, it should be a threat because if it was done in a group, the researcher cannot focus to specifically all 3 at the same time. Okay, so these are the suggestions, which is for further research. First is to provide extra exercises in each number of boxes of the snake and ladder. Second, experimental studies for others, which is provide the intervention online or provide a new website for the intervention. And lastly, time spent, increase the number of time spent to for the intervention for the pupils. Okay, but the recommendation, experimental study for others, I have provided an online website for my intervention after I have done it with the students. So there are some feedback from teachers all over the world using our website. So conclusion, for my research, for my presentation, URI, as you guys, has proven to be effective in improving year 3 pupils' issues in constructing simple sentences. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. The survey will now continue with a question and answer session. Please welcome the panel of assessors to ask any questions to the presenters.
Okay, one, I start off here.
Okay.
Alright, can we go back to your research objective slide?
Okay.
Alright, research objective. You have 3 research objectives.
Yes.
So number 1 is that you wanted to see whether the intervention has improved the sentence construction, right?
Yes.
Okay, and the second one, isn't it not the same?
It is quite similar, but the focus of the objective is quite different because the first one to examine whether the students' simple sentence construction improve solely based on the intervention itself or by themselves, which means that either 100% using the intervention or by the slides, the early slides or the presentation I have done with the students before implementing the intervention. Because before the intervention applied, I have done a short class with every participant. So there would be maybe some of the participants has improved their simple sentence based on the presentation itself and not from the intervention.
Now, if you say that where in your research you find out, you collect data,
Okay.
whether or not it was because of the slide that you did before or because of this intervention. Where in this research that is presented?
From my point of view, the answers maybe can be, not maybe, I mean comes from the interviews that I have done. Whether I have asked the participants, besides the question of exciting, fun, etc., whether they learn things from the intervention, they improve their simple sentence from the intervention itself, or by the presentation I have done, or any other resource they find by their own, because it was done online.
Say again, what are the questions that you asked to differentiate between the two?
Oh, I'm sorry, but I did not remember the questions specifically.
Because this is a very tricky question, you see. You are asking the students to recall something they have done and also something that you do after that. So I think it is best for you to stick to the what you call the improvement based on the intervention itself. That's all, not previously. Right, you just stick to that. And next one is that to identify the responses. What kind of what do you mean by to identify the responses?
The responses based on the interview and also observation, specifically the interview, whether first they enjoy the intervention or they can participate actively during the implementation of the intervention, or they enjoy using the intervention, or they can learn anything from.
Okay, so what are the things that you managed to extract for that question, for that objective?
For the responses.
For objective number 3, responses, what are the themes that you managed to gather?
Okay, first I have 4 things for my interview, which was enjoyment, benefit, understanding, and improvisation.
So those 4.
Yes.
Alright. And what last question from me? You mentioned just now that you did this in 3 cycles.
Yes.
The first cycle is on tenses. Second
Yes.
cycle was on adjective. The third
Yeah.
one is on preposition.
Yes.
Why do you call it a cycle?
Because from what I can see, and my supervisor stated that if we focus on one class only, the sentence is not solid and they cannot produce a solid sentence structure based on the pre and post test. Because in pre and post test, I give them a picture, a stimulus, and there are some, and they need to construct more than one sentence. So after each sentence, they need to connect each sentence by either stating the preposition and also adding the adjectives and also the verbs.
What is the purpose of cycle?
First, to amend the intervention done in the first cycle, and then from there I can see that the weakness in the first cycle is lack of word classes that should be added in the next cycle.
Alright, so meaning to say in the first cycle you did tenses.
Yes.
And in the first cycle you found that the students were using adjective wrongly. Or
Yes,
not,
yes.
or omitted adjectives.
Mm.
So in the second cycle you added adjectives.
Yes.
So when you added adjective, was there any intervention? Did your intervention include adjectives?
Yes, include adjectives.
Alright, so you amend adjectives.
Yes.
And then in the third, after you have done the second cycle, you included adjectives. Then you found out what was
Preposition.
what about preposition?
Preposition, sometimes the students use preposition wrongly, such as if they use last Saturday, automatically their tenses are mixed up. Like last Saturday, I am going, like that. So to improve the prepositions overall for the third cycle, I've amended it.
Say again that the last Saturday I
Last Saturday, I am. So incorrect use of tense, but I decide to highlight, to amend the preposition used to maybe future or
preposition used.
Yes, preposition of time.
Preposition of time. What is the preposition in that sentence?
Like last Saturday.
Like it's at the verb. Yes. That's at the of time. That's not preposition. Okay, take a look at that. Yeah, why take a look at that? What I'm trying to say here is that when you have one cycle, normally you do something, an intervention, and you find that something wrong, something that is not wrong, something that you can help better from your own observation as well as from the student's feedback. So you improve on that. Okay, so take a look at that. And that's about it from me.
Yes, congratulations on very interesting presentation. Okay, I think based on your objective, I think you need only one objective. Objective number 2 is just enough to answer all the 3 objectives there. When you investigate, I mean you're going to examine, going to identify. So to me, you have 3 things, but else everything is in your objective 2. So discuss with your FA. Say it just give you an idea. Maybe based on that one objective. And from the beginning, you need to mention you're using AR. That's all you need. You don't have to go qualitative here and there. No need to carry off the word qualitative because you are doing something in AR. And my last question, how long you take to come up with this pre-cycle? And what is the gap between pre and post-test?
Everything, the gap is between 3 to 4 weeks of the total. From pre to post.
And every cycle?
One cycle per week.
Well done.
Thank you. Now please welcome the next presenter, Dean Wayburn from Tempat to present her presentation. Please welcome.
Please take a deep breath first. Good morning, Dr. Sakia, Dr. Mas, and all my friends in this room. My name is Dean Wayburn, and I'll be presenting my basic qualitative study, The Influence of Using Word Games on Year 3 Pupils' English Vocabulary Retention. The background of the study, why it happened is because I realized that Year 3 pupils' English had deteriorated after the pandemic. I think it's because of the lack of exposure to listening and also speaking, because during online classes, most of the teachers would conduct offline classes, right? Okay, and then many people actually regarded word games as a waste of time, when it is in fact beneficial because, first of all, it can boost the pupils' confidence. It will increase their motivation to learn, which will lead to the improvement of their English skills. Next is the problem statement. I realized that the pupils were unable to name words from the Year 2 and Year 3 targeted vocabulary list during the first week of teaching. And they also could not understand basic instructions. For example, when I say, can you write this down? They couldn't understand. And then they also showed a lack of interest in learning. For the purpose of the study, there were 2 purposes. First one is to explore the benefits of word games in the Year 3 classroom. And the second one is to determine how the word games could improve the Year 3 pupils' attitude and progress in learning English. So my research objectives would be in line with my purposes. The first one is to determine if playing word games frequently during set induction can contribute to the improvement of Year 3 pupils' vocabulary retention. And the second one is to find out if word games can improve the Year 3 pupils' attitudes in learning English. Then, my research question would of course be asking questions related to the research objectives.
The first one is how do word games improve Year 3 pupils' vocabulary retention if played frequently during set induction for several minutes. And the second one is can word games improve Year 3 pupils' attitudes in learning English? What makes this research important is the fact that when I was assigned to the Year 3 classroom, there were 33 pupils in the class, but they all had substandard English performance. 6 of them could not read and also write alphabets. That is quite shocking because they were 9 years old. And, so teachers should implement and normalize word games in the classroom as it can help them create an engaging, fun, and conducive learning environment. Games can also help break language barriers because all of my students consisted of Malay pupils. So they can relate the Malay terms to the English words and find the similarities in things and also actions. So for the past researches, I have read up at least 7. It is a laborious task and they helped me a lot in conducting my study. The first thing I learned is the misconception of games. Most people think that it's a waste of time and it can cause disruption. And for large population classes, it will be very difficult to manage. And the second thing is that teachers often mislook games as a time killer activity when they don't know what to do at the end of the class. And lastly, if the games are being played too frequently, the pupils will feel tedious and also rebel. Second of all is the benefits of games, where games can help pupils significantly, whether mentally or also physically. Because games can help them feel relaxed or can motivate them, and it also promotes competitiveness in them and provide meaningful language context when they can just use it without thinking too much. And also, the repetition in games help pupils in remembering English vocabulary. The third one is the factors in using games. By factors, I would say things that we should take into consideration before we play the games. For example, the age and their proficiency level. It shouldn't be too difficult because it will demotivate them. And the second thing is to align the games with the pupils' demeanor. If they are uptight, serious, maybe you can play Scrabble at a very large scale. Or if you are playful, we can play charades or the whisper challenge. And third is to align the games with the topic. For instance, if I was teaching verbs, I wouldn't be playing games talking about preposition. And lastly is the findings and the gaps. 7 out of 7 agreed that word games can help improve learners' vocabulary retention and also their English skills. The achievements were clearly seen in the pre and post test when I read the quasi-experimental research test. And for the gaps, games must match the pupils' levels. It is a must. And we must avoid playing games too often and match the vocabulary tests to pupils' learning. The research design that I had applied is the basic qualitative study because I wanted to understand if word games are useful in helping pupils remember vocabulary. So my research focus would be to investigate how word games help pupils improve their English vocabulary range. There were 33 pupils in the class that I was assigned to. It is a mixed ability classroom and I had used purposeful sampling to select the 3 samples. I believe that the 3 samples represented the population well, and they were all given pseudonyms. Next, thank you. The research instruments that I had used were interview, semi-structured interview, field notes, and also the document analysis on the worksheets. For the interview, it was conducted under protocol, so I would tell them that the interview will be recorded. If they feel uncomfortable, they can stop it. And I also told them that once I had written down everything in the interview, I would delete the video. For field notes, since there were 3 sessions of word games, so altogether there were 9 because there were 3 samples. And the pupils were not notified when they were being observed because I do not want to tamper with their behavior before that. And for document analysis, which is worksheets, I would distribute worksheets at the end of the class every time when I implement the word game, so I can see whether they truly learn or not. Research procedure made easy in 5 steps. First, I identified the problem during the first week, and then I created a simplified proposal and sent it to my supervisor. Once I got his consent, I asked the headmaster whether I could conduct the study, and he said yes. So I went ahead and selected my samples and obtained their parents' consent form. Then in the second week, I began data collection. So my data collection procedure It is a 5-week procedure where in the first week I had built good rapport with the pupils so that I know which one I should select and which one I think needed more help. And the second thing is that I began playing word games in week 2 where lessons precede games, which means that since I had already taught them in the first week, so it's easier for me to play games in the second week. And there were 3 sessions of word games in a month. So I would rewrite the field notes on my laptop when I jot down their reaction during the class, during the word game session, and administer worksheet at the end of the lesson. So after I evaluated the worksheet, I pass it back to them, let them keep the paper, and I conduct interview at the end of the month. And after I transcribe the interview, the whole data collection procedure ended in 5 weeks. So during that time, I would check for overlooked data or information. So my data analysis procedure, I applied the thematic analysis, where I organized the data based on the timeline, and I also began coding the data based on the themes. I had discovered 4 themes, which were vocabulary retention, unfilled learning environment, readiness for classroom evaluation, and effort in improving English skills. Data findings, the important part. Since there were 4 themes, so the first theme answered to the first research question, while the rest answered to the second research question. The first theme, vocabulary retention. They had shown improvement because they went from understanding verbs in the second week to merely naming them within 3 weeks. And they also scored excellently in the worksheets when they were able to name, and also they were able to name verbs in the interview within 10 seconds. Second theme is fun-filled learning environment. I could see that the samples had transitioned from being reserved to carefree spirits. And all the samples always had a great time in the class, and they expressed that games were fun in the interview. As for readiness for classroom evaluation, they were always keen in finishing their homework, and they always completed to submit within themselves. And they also preferred homework over word games in the interview. Lastly is the effort in improving English skills themes, where they had portrayed various demeanors that showed their effort, like asking teachers to explain, getting assistance from friends, and also found the answers in the textbooks. Since they had suggested practical ways like reading, listening, and storytelling and also performances, I think they understand why it's important to improve English. So for the discussion, the first thing is how do word games improve year 3 pupils' vocabulary retention rate frequently during set induction for several minutes. The first theme answered to the first research question, which is vocabulary retention, where the samples had shown gradual improvement in vocabulary retention because they had hands-on experience while playing charades and also last man standing and hangman. So they understand better when there were repetition and also assigning words to action. And lastly, they said that the questions were easy in the games. Oh my god, because they can cooperate with each other. Sorry. The second research question, can word games improve year 3 pupils' attitudes in learning English? Fun-filled learning environment is one of the themes that answered to this second research question because a boring classroom can be transformed into a classroom that is rich in an environment where they have stimulations and also interactions. And they can communicate and also help each other, which in turn nurtured selflessness in them. And they always had a great time in class. They never misbehaved because they are afraid that if one of them suddenly misbehaves, then the whole class would be punished. And lastly, there was an increase of participation rate and also their confidence level. The second thing, which answers to the second research question, is readiness for classroom evaluation. Pretty self-explanatory, I would say, because classroom evaluation would mean worksheets or quiz, right? They were always expecting, so they always completed the worksheet and submitted in a very short period. They also prefer this type of evaluation method because they had preparation before. From the games and the lessons, it helped them greatly in answering. And lastly, they also showcase their skills productively because it is an evidence for them to bring home and to tell their parents that they're doing great in class. And lastly is effort in improving language English skills. This is a discovery theme, not seen before in any of the research that I have read. They have showed ways that can contribute to improving English skills, like the ones that I mentioned before. And since helping others is helping oneself, I would say that when they were helping the classmates in the classroom, they are refreshing what they had learned. So in a way, they can improve their own English. And their worksheets scored excellently. And their mindset also had changed because they embraced the boldness to try new ways to improve English skills. So the conclusion, I would say that there was a 180-degree change in their attitudes when learning English because they were always on their best behavior. They exhibited positive attitudes in learning English. And the second conclusion is that English vocabulary retention had improved tremendously. They succeeded in naming vocabulary irrespective of time and place, for example, interview. So my recommendation would be, for the interview, carefully construct the sentence, carefully construct the questions before we conduct the interview in case there were some overlooked information that you need to ask in depth. And make sure you carry it out on someone first before we do it for real. And the second recommendation for future researchers is the samples. I would say it is best to select samples range between weak to intermediate because they are the ones who really need help. And if the outcomes were more favorable for the weak and also the intermediate pupils, then it will be more credible. And lastly, the implications. Word games have definitely changed the dynamics of teaching and learning of English because it is not a waste of time. It is helpful. You just have to use it correctly. And it can also alter the learner's attitude in learning English. And the repetition and active usage of vocabulary have really helped them in remembering better. And they can use English in a relaxed environment. That is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. The ceremony will now continue with the question and answer session. Please welcome Dr. Satya and Dr. Masa to answer any questions you present. Good morning, Wen.
Good morning.
Okay, can you go back to research objectives? Alright. You use these word games during your set induction.
Yes.
How long it takes to do your set?
5 to 10 minutes.
5 to 10 minutes. Okay. Yeah, but I think set induction should not last more than 5 minutes.
Yes. But it is like sometimes when the people, okay, most of the time when I was playing Hangman, it is a very short period game, right? And then I had played charades. Charades takes longer. So sometimes they range from 5 to 7 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. But I always make it up by cutting short the presentation time because they somehow learn the things that I was going to introduce them in the set induction.
Still, the philosophy of set induction is positive.
Okay, I understand. Thank you so much.
Okay, my second question is refer to related past research. Okay, who says about this game's misconceptions?
There are a lot. If I were to name them off my mind that I remember, Mubaslat in 2012, Ranmit in 2019, and also Donald Stubby in 2017.
You need to.
I need to list out.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not generally come from you.
All right.
It's come from the outside.
Okay.
That's all. Okay, well, all right. Could you please explain to me regarding your interview? What kind of interview did you do with them? It's semi-structured. Okay, it's semi-structured, and since it is one class, how would you do it?
I selected 3 samples. So I would ask them to come out because it was fasting period. It was during the fasting month. So I would ask one of the samples to come out from the classroom and go to the library. I wouldn't let them interview together at once. And then so I asked
So
them.
it's individual interview,
Yes.
or that's got stated.
Oh,
Alright. How many times? How many? Once only.
at the end of the workings.
So once for every session there is only for every session there is interview. So
Once in 5 weeks.
Oh, there's only once in 5 weeks. So when was it done?
At the end of the research.
Okay. Okay. All right. Next question is the observation. How was it done? Was it done by you?
I was sort of expecting this question, so I was prepared. Okay, for my notes, right, there were 4 things that I listed out. So I would take note of every single aspect that I wanted to jot down. I think the first one I couldn't see, it is their demeanor in class, whether they are prepared or not. The second one is their vocabulary skill, whether they can name the vocabulary during the game in a very short period or they face trouble. And then the third one, I think it's their attitude in learning. Like
So
their
that
attitude.
is your protocol. Your protocol covers 4 things. One of it, demeanor, what is it?
Demeanor, vocabulary skill, general. General means how they react in the class, how they help their friends. And I can't remember the last one, but I think it's
Alright, well that's fine. It's just that when you do your research, you collect your data yourself, observation. That is bias factor because you are the researcher. So it is advisable in the future that you don't collect the data yourself because you want to see things so much in your students. Right?
true.
And with the slightest evidence of that, you claim it is that.
Yes.
Alright, so it's best that you get someone who is independent, like your group of teachers and whatnot, yeah? Alright, for quality revision. Right, that's all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Hold on, Belum.
I'll give a cue and she will.
Oh, okay.
No worries. Thank you. Now, please welcome the next presenter by Rabbi Muhammad Noor from Class of 5 to present her presentation. Please welcome.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. I wish to Dr. Safia Rahim and Dr. Masar as well as my fellow friends. So my name is Noor Umaira binti Muhammad Noor, and I am from PISMP Class of 5 to 2018 intake. And today I will present my research findings, which titled "Using Couple English to Improve the CFR A1 Level Vocabulary Among Year 5 Indo Hybrid Course of SK in Tempat." So moving on to the background of the study, I just want to highlight here that there are two main important points of my research, which is the first one is the CFR A1 level vocabulary, and the second one is a set of games which integrates local context. Okay, so what is CEFR? I'm sure most of you here already know, but CEFR refers to the Common European Framework of Reference for Language, and it is a standard international framework for language teaching and learning, and has been adopted in many countries, including Malaysia, in 2013. It was first integrated into the primary school syllabus in 2017, starting with the children born in 2010. Okay, so moving on, in CEFR, there are 3 types of language users with 6 levels of proficiencies, which are A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and also C2. In this study, I'm focusing on A1 level vocabulary. So as we know, A1 level vocabulary, a pupil is expected to achieve A1 level vocabulary with at the end of year 4, A1 high level, because we have A1 high and also A1 low. And starting in year 5, they are expected to master A2 low level of CFR. However, how can they move into A2 low level CFR if they haven't yet mastered the A1 high level of CFR? Okay, so based on my past teaching experience, most of the pupils are having difficulties in understanding the lesson due to the unfamiliar context. And also the teachers, they are having the lack of CFR aligned teaching and learning materials. For example, during my previous practicum, I was assigned to teach year 5, and my and my mentor assigned me to teach study from topic 7 and and above. In which at that time there was no one that taught topic 7 because it was the first year of the implementation for year 5. Okay, and I was like, how do I find the learning materials? It's very hard. I have to spend a lot of time designing my own because there are no one to refer to. Even teacher Fira, who I always refer to, haven't produced materials for that yet. So it's very saddening for me. And okay, so why vocabulary? Because we know vocabulary is the building foundation of any language learning process. It can be symbolized as the building bricks, in which if you do not have the bricks, you can build a solid house. Okay, so when the learners possess insufficient vocabulary knowledge, they will also struggle understanding spoken language and also written language because they could not understand how can they produce. Next. Okay, so statement of problem, there are 4. The first one is the low mastery of CFR A1 level vocabulary, which I have said that leads to people low confidence in speaking and writing skills. Why do I say so? Because most of the people, they are scared to speak up in front of the class, not because they are shy, but sometimes because they don't have the vocabulary, the ability. Let's say, okay, boleh cakap Melayu. A lot of them will talk, but in English, no one will stand up. Okay, and then they frequently ask for translations and also started to say the words in English. Okay, number 2, the lack of local context in the CFR aligned materials. One of my previous pupils have asked me, teacher, what is essay? Teacher, what is notes? I don't know because they are not present in our Malaysian local culture. And this has led to the people's motivation and interest with learning vocabulary because they don't understand. For example, why would you learn about Azerbaijan song? It's not related to Malaysia. So why? The pupils now are learning without meaning making. But meaning making is the most important part of learning. The students have to make their own meaning out of the new knowledge they receive. If not, the objectives of education will not be achieved. Okay, and the teachers' challenges in incorporating CFR in their teaching, as I said before, are familiar language and cultural setting, and also the lack of locally tailored CFR aligned materials, which has made the English teachers to depend on textbook, which is not appropriate to the pupils at all. Okay, so that's the main purpose of this study. The first one is to gain an understanding on the use of coupled English in improving the mastery of CFR A1 level vocabulary among year 5 and other pupils. And number 2, to investigate the usage of coupled English in attracting the year 5 and pupils' interest towards learning vocabulary. Okay, for the research objectives, the first one is to improve if I can people's mastery of CFR A1 level vocabulary. And number 2 is to increase the people's interest. Still with research question, does the usage of coupled English help to improve the people's mastery of CFR A1 level vocabulary? And does the usage of coupled English help to increase the year 5 people's interest towards learning vocabulary? Okay, so significance of the research. The first one is for the pupils. It will help to cater an authentic learning and real-life experience with contextualized local contents and vocabulary, and also increase the people's interest and motivations toward learning vocabulary. And for English teachers, it will help to provide a locally tailored material to engage the young learners and create a fine digital learning platform, and also help to improve the researchers' teaching practice and instructional strategies. Okay. So basically, for the related past researches, there are a lot, but these are the main ones. The first one, okay, this is a survey by Noor Azli Effendi and Ali Akmal Muhammad Hazim 2019. It said that most Malaysian ESL teachers are having difficulties designing CFR aligned learning process, which I'm sure most of us can relate. And yeah, almost all of the respondents agreed that they always rely on textbook exercises. But as we know, in textbook exercises, for example, I took a topic from year 5, Get Smart 1. It's about popular culture in America, in which the actors feature actors such as Johnny Depp, Madonna, and all, in which our pupils grew up by watching PIP. How can they know about Madonna, which was famous in late 1980s to late 1990s? Okay. And based on Farah Farzan Muhammad, there is also a survey. The main challenges faced by teachers in using Supermind textbook are the cultural aspect. And the textbook's authenticity is actually vital for the people who feel connected to the language. We grew up by reading Malaysian culture in textbook, right? There's Hari Raya, there's Tahun Cina, but nowadays there's Thanksgiving, there's Halloween. Who celebrates them in Malaysia? Okay, and then by Nur Hidayat 2016 and also now 2014, this one is action research. It is found that the usage of the kids is an effective strategy to teach English because one, it helps the pupils to memorize the vocabulary easier, and number two, it keeps them motivated. So I think like this action research is very essential in my action research result. And last one by Isabella 2015, it said that pupils that were taught using multiple intelligence-based methods showed significant improvement in vocabulary acquisition and retention as compared to the traditional learning methods. Okay, so basically, multiple intelligence by Howard Gardner and also contextual learning are the two main theories used in this study. I will explain the definition at the end of this presentation. Okay, so back to the most famous research design in action research, which is the cyclical action research model by Chemist and Remediated 1988. So why I chose this design? Is it because it is famous? Partially yes, but also because it provides flexibility. It shows the dynamic process of the action research itself, in which we have the planning stage, action stage, observing stage, and most importantly, reflecting and revised plan, which leads to the next cycle. Okay, for the research focus is to use the couple English to improve the different people's mastery of CFR in one level, vocabulary, which is one of the most recent issues in Malaysia as a country. Okay, so for population and sample, the population is 33 pupils of year 5 to group 5 year of let's say the Chimbaran Kalendar value very near to here. It is the third class out of 5 year 5 classes, and it is a mixed ability classroom with an average level of English language proficiency. Okay, so how do I select the samples? It's selected using purposeful sampling by identifying two pupils who exhibit a homogeneous grade, which is the low mastery of CFRA 1 level vocabulary during the preliminary investigation. And throughout the study, pseudonym will be used. So the RP1 is Alisa, RP2 is Fahid. Okay, so this is the intervention. Couple in Terengganu local dialects mean campo, or in English it can be said as English. So it's a digital intervention operates through a set of forward slides, comes in the form of a page map set in Terengganu as you can see. And each location includes a variety of CFRA 1 level vocabulary. So it's basically a game where people are free to select which one they want to go to first. Okay. So the research procedure, in training, I do the preliminary investigation consisting of interview with the people's English teacher, preliminary vocabulary test consisting of 20 MCQ questions, and also observation during English classes. I also ask for the parental consent forms and intervention preparation. And then this one I implement in 3 cycles for 3 consecutive days. And I observe the results using the data collection methods prepared, and also I reflect on the study findings by analyzing the data. Alright. Okay, for the data collection procedures, I use pre and post intervention sheets, just reflect the journals, observation checklists, and also some instruction interview, because this one is very flexible and is open to new findings. So for each intervention section, I did an observation checklist, pre and post intervention worksheet, some instruction interview, and then I write just reflect the journal by myself. Okay, for the data analysis procedure, basically I use 7 analysis in which the themes are pre-conceived using inductive approach, and the themes analyzed are as shown here. Okay, so basically I do the data collection process and I do data cleaning to eliminate necessary information. I analyze the keywords, for example, interest, the people's legal information, I highlight the term, and then I deal with the data in the form of tables. Okay, so data finding and discussion. Okay, basically ignore this slide. Just listen to me. Okay, Masih yang baru level vocabulary. As you can see here, Alisa who scored 8 in the pre-intervention machine managed to come up with 17, and Faik who scored 11 managed to achieve 18. Okay, next. Okay, so this one interests towards the new vocabulary, which answers for RQ2. Okay, so based on this, I can see the positive facial expressions, giggling when doing the games, volunteering to ask the questions, and display competitiveness. All of these are observed during the higher intervention session. Okay, display of positive facial expression, body language, and the only thing that needs improvement all the time was determination, which is the willingness to answer the question. Okay, for swimming structure interviews, by the end of the intervention session, their responses were much longer and were much positive than during the first one. Okay. Okay, so basically I do a triangulation of data in which during the first cycle, the triangulation of data was only achieved for one of the research participants, but by the end of the session, both of the participants have achieved a triangulation of data. Okay, so that's validating the findings of the research. Okay, so finally the conclusion. So basically the use of Kapo English significantly improves the text mastery of CFRD level vocabulary and attract the people's interest in the new vocabulary. Positive improvement was seen, and in the long term, this will help the low proficient pupils to move progressively into the next CFR band. And English teachers should also try to utilize this digital intervention. All right. So for the recommendation and suggestion, there are 3, which is administrator, teachers, and parents. For administrator, they can promote the use of digital educational technology and support the teachers by providing 3 things, which is the first one is the time in the terms of the workload. The second one is in terms of human cost, and the third one is in terms of budgets or fundings. And teachers can adapt this intervention to fit their people's language proficiency levels, demographics, and learning context. So, if, for example, if you're in Sabah, you can try to include the diversity of ethnic and racial groups there. And also can help for B1 and B2, because believe it or not, up to 9 years old and above are still interested in learning through games. Alright. And for parents, they can utilize the intervention as additional learning at home, because it's an online digital game, so they can just download it. Alright, so next. Okay, so implication. This will serve as an instrument to increase the people's interest and motivation towards learning vocabulary. And also it will help to present the vocabulary in a culturally familiar manner or context. And it also provides a local interpretation of the syllabus, which will be a great help for the teachers. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. The ceremony will now continue with a question and answer section. Please welcome Dr. Satya and Dr. Masabani to ask any questions to the presenter.
Thank you, Ms. Moderator. Umar, well done. Okay, my first question, what is the research design for this research?
Action research.
Okay, now when we present, it is very important that we clearly state what is our research design at the beginning of the research. Right, rather than letting your panels wondering about it. Of course, the panels know, but you are like waiting for you to state that at the end of this, what you call your research. Okay. Next one is the observation protocol.
Observation
Protocol. What are the questions or what are the things that you must have by yourself?
the observation.
Yes.
The observation was done using an observation technique in which during the 3 intervention session, I select a person to be an observer. But for the first session, it's actually supposed to be my mentor, but however, he could not join the Google session because of some personal problems. And for the second and third, I actually asked a fellow teacher trainees of mine to check, so that when I fill in the observation checklist form, I refer to them as to like, is this true? Can you see this in my section or not? Just to validate and to not let me being influenced by my own bias.
So it was you.
It was
It was validated
validated.
by them. Okay. And the third thing is that I like highlight this. This is not advisement, right? The fact that you have done this, I would like to suggest. I would like to suggest for you to share with this Kampung English with teachers or teaching in Terengganu, possibly, or anywhere around the country. And you can easily have an innovation here. You can share with them, you provide a manual on how to use it, provide a link as well as a Google form, giving you feedback on this innovation, on this thing that you have done. So you can have data then for your innovation, right? That's all.
Congratulations, Umaira. Okay, can you refer to research objectives? Okay. What stage you will use to collect the data for RQ2?
RQ2. Okay, so for RQ2, I use the observation technique, teacher reflective journal, document analysis, and also semi-structured interviews. Among the things that I've analyzed are people's interest, people's participation, people's determination, and also challenges, and also future improvisation.
So all those questions will answer whether the increase their interest, is it?
Yes, because at the initial stage, we can see that the table at the and at the appendices. Okay, so for example, we can see here that the participants' interest has not been identified in the first station, but in the second, the third, we can identify the themes. So I think that's the indicator of whether the people's interest has been increased or not.
Thank you.
It's okay.
Stretch it out. Stretch it out.
Last one.
Thank you. Now please welcome the last presenter for today's session, the Erica Binti Kaiser Ahmed from Pendidikan presentation.
Assalamualaikum and good morning to everyone. This is an action research presentation entitled Improving Grammar in Present Time Sentences among Year 5 students by using Readiness technique. I am the Erica Binti from PISMP June 2018 Central 2, and my supervisor is Mr. Chan Song Yong. So let's begin with the background of this study. So, following the aim of the English language curriculum for primary school, the Kementerian Pendidikan Malaysia in 2018 emphasized that learning English as a second language is necessary for Malaysian students to understand and apply the use of English in the real world interaction. So on top of that, the English language proficiency in Malaysia is highly regarded internationally as desirable attribute to facilitate the economic, the academic, and also social mobility. So this is a major concern for Malaysia to manifest the English language properly as a mode of communication, as it occupies the status of commercial language that dominantly and extensively worldwide. However, the shocking realization came to light that majority of Malaysian students have a poor English academic performance when the Performance Management and Delivery Unit Malaysia in 2013 revealed that 25% of Malaysian students from primary 6 failed in the National Primary School Examination or the UPSR, which was abolished as they performed poorly in English, especially in writing comprehension. Okay, the next one. This is the statement of problem. So these are the issues that have been identified from my past teaching experiences, which I done in online session. So the first one is repetitions of grammatical errors in present tense sentences. So in my previous teaching experiences, I discovered that my students tend to make the same grammatical mistake, which consists of auxiliary be and also the subject-verb agreement. So again, they tend to repeat the same grammatical errors even when they have been corrected. Okay, so moving on to the next one, they also presented a negative perception towards English grammar in the learning process. So some of them think of the language as a threat, unnecessary, and find it hard to master the basic grammar as compared to the first language. So I discovered also that they tend to have the language interference with the Malay language, as usually in my classroom session, they tend to have a direct translation kind of approach when translating the English language. So usually the language structure from Malay language is translated directly into the English language, which actually go against the language structures of English. Okay, so the purpose of my study is to improve the grammar in present tense sentences among primary school students by incorporating inductive approach and error correction in written text as a method to identify and understand the use of grammatical tenses. So, okay, thank you. Okay, so the focus of my study is first to focus on the inductive approach, in which my technique focuses giving the student the authority or autonomy to outline the grammar rules from the passage that are grammatically correct. And then we can give them an error correction task in which they need to identify the errors, and then they need to identify the errors and then explain to me why that particular sentence is wrong. This is to make sure that they understand the use of the grammatical tenses. Okay, next one. Thank you. Okay, so in conjunction to that, this is my research objective. The first, there is only one. Okay. The research objective is to improve the grammar in present tense sentences among year 5 students by using error rebel technique. And my research question is, does the use of error rebel technique is able to improve the grammar in present tense sentences among year 5 students? Okay, the significance of my research is focuses on two parties, the students and also teachers. For students, it actually provides opportunity for them to improve and familiarize themselves with English grammar through the realizations of errors. Number two, it increases the ability to construct present tense sentences correctly. Okay, for teachers, it provides an alternative for grammar teaching instruction. And the other one, it also helps teachers to serve as facilitators in developing a group of learners who are more self-reliant. So as I stated earlier, the grammar rules are expected by students to outline them. So in other words, we work as a supervisor to supervise them to ensure that they are in the right track. Okay, the next one. These are the related past researchers. So in a case study by C in 2014, the most frequent errors made by Malaysian students with a percentage of 47.2 are in subject-verb agreement and tenses due to the absence of subject-verb agreement in the Malay language. So as I explained earlier, there are a language interference between the Malay language and also the English language. The second one, further research by Yasmin and Puan Abdullah in 2019 explained that 94.8% of 77 students make grammatical errors when it comes to verbs and using the tenses. Okay, it can be seen that they have issues with tenses such as utilizing the singular verb in the present tense, which they do not act as. And some students they even left the auxiliary verbs out of their sentence as they were not familiar with the context. Okay, the third one, Bingham and Hamidah in 2020 explained that majority of the students are unable to construct sentences utilizing their verbs and use correct verbs in the writing. So numerous repetitive errors are made as students are incompetent to detect the grammatical errors. Okay, and the last one is in 2019 mentioned that students can use the error correction for their own language learning development and reach beyond their achieved language because they need to pay more attention to the correction and new features of the English language which work differently from the first language. Okay, so this is the research design. I used the Chemist and Medical in 1988, which consists of 4 stages, starting from the plan, action, observe, and reflecting. Okay, so the populations of my research study is I use the students from my previous practicum, which is from year 5 Pelajar. It consists of 30 people, and all the students are girls because I went to an Islamic school girls. Okay, for my sample, the criteria for my research participants are those who presented low and moderate level of mastery in present tenses, and they demonstrate misbehavior in classroom session. Sometimes the misbehavior might be like displaying inadequacy or low participation in the classroom. Okay, so the pseudonyms are used to represent the research participants, and the participants are Adelia, Chumaka, Jasmine, and Melu. Okay, so these are the intervention specification. It can be used in both online and face-to-face interaction because it's a technique. It doesn't mean that you have to use tools, online tools only. Okay, so the procedure is first you have to give a passage of grammatically correct sentences to the students, and then ask them to outline the grammar rules in that particular text, so they can work in pairs or groups. Okay, so my intervention highlights the importance of working as a team or working in pairs. Okay, this is to encourage to increase their motivation and ensure that I think it is better for them to work with their friends rather than work alone. Okay. Next, after they have outlined their grammar, we're going to give them an error identification task in which they need to work again as a team to identify the errors, and then we're going to discuss this together in the classroom. But if we want to ensure that they understand this individually, we're going to call out their names by using, this is an online session, so we're going to use the classroomscreen.com in which we can input their name and then just click on the choose button to click to choose any students from that 30 people. And then ask them to explain why this is wrong to ensure that they actually understand the grammatical tenses. Okay? Alright, so the instrument for data collection is I use the pre-intervention test and post-intervention test for document analysis. As for observation, the behavior checklist is to review the changes in behavior shown by research participants during the interventions of error level. And lastly, the semi-structured interview session. Next, thank you. Okay, so these are my research procedures. I begin with identify the problems in the classroom session, and then I address the research problem to formulate the research objective and question. Moving on, we determine the research approach and then develop the action plan by choosing the research participants and data collection method. Next, prepare instruments for data collection. Number 6, collecting data, and number 7, data analysis and interpretation. So as for data collection procedures, I prepare the consent letter and obtain permission from research participants, and then prepare the instruments for data collection. Brief the research participants regarding the process. Then research participants apply the intervention and answer task afterwards. Then research participants are being observed throughout the process. And lastly, research participants are interviewed to understand their perspective and get feedback. Okay, so for data analysis procedure,
triangulations are made to verify the findings of the investigation and prove its credibility. So, in order to make the triangulation, I use the analysis from document analysis, observation, and also the interview. Okay, so these are the data findings, and let's move on. Okay, so in short, in document analysis, significant improvements are made by research participants as they are able to minimize the grammatical errors and improve the mastery of English grammar. So, if we see in the previous slide, can you go to the this one? You see in the previous slide, this is the pre-intervention test. And then these are the post-intervention tests. There are a significant improvement, but there are still slight errors that they make. So the slight errors are made due to accidental mistake, which when I ask them, it seems that they are too confident to answer the question because they know the answer. So maybe this is something that can be self-corrected for them. They can self-correct it. And of course, when you are too confident, it may lead you astray. So be careful with that. Okay, let's move on to the next. Okay, so as for observation, from the data that gathered from the post-intervention and also pre-intervention test, it can be discovered that the error level technique does not only improving the grammar in the grammar learning for students, but there are also improvement in their behaviors in the classroom. So there are positive changes in behavior that can be seen through the learning session, and research participants appear to be more engaged to participate in the learning session and forsake the unfavorable attitudes and perception they had in the earlier session. Okay, in the interview, the analysis of the interview, the research participants emphasize the technique is able to improve their understanding on present tenses, and they find the technique as enjoyable to participate as they get to do group work and have autonomous learning. Okay, so the discussion, does the use of error level technique is able to improve the grammar in present tense sentences among U5 students? So from the triangulation made, it has been proven that the three collected data are interrelated and support each other. So this results reveal that the research participants are able to improve the grammar in present tense sentences by using the error level technique. So the objective of this research has been achieved. Okay, so the conclusion, we can say that all research participants show remarkable improvement on their post-intervention test. And then behavioral responses indicated that the research participants enjoyed the learning process and can be proven by the significant improvement in the post-intervention score. Next, research participants learn better in team and when given the autonomy to lead the learning session. So instead of we just spoon feed them, give them the autonomy to lead the learning session. Okay, and lastly, all research participants agreed that they understand the structure of present tense better. Okay, so recommendation for teachers. For teachers, students should be encouraged to explore the usage of the grammar in language. So maybe give them some waiting time for them to actually discover the rule of the grammar by their own instead of spoon feed them, which may not be that significant for them. Okay, and number two, proper exercises and worksheets can be distributed to the student occasionally and encourage the student to do it in pairs or small group, especially in the online session. When you are doing the online session, my first classroom session with them, it can be seen that not most of them entered the class or participate in the classroom because they started to have low motivation. Okay, so in order for you to increase their motivation, you have to make them responsible as a team. So in my classroom session, I divided them into 4 teams, and then usually when we have discussions as a group, we use the breakout rooms as a way for them to discuss in the Google Meet. Okay, and as for the further research, that as for further research, there are debates concerning the technique as an application to grammar teaching, but not concerned about integrating the inductive teaching into it. Okay, so the result gained from 3 instruments should be a consideration for further research. Okay, the implication, the technique can act as encouragement for teachers
to implement error-rebel technique in grammar teaching practice. Number two, it is a new insight for teachers to increase students' autonomy to lead grammar learning session. And lastly, adaptable to be applied face-to-face and online classroom session. And that's all from me.
Thank you for your presentation. Sir, we will now continue with the question and answer session. Please welcome Dr. Ambilan and Dr. Masa to ask the question to present.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moderator. Congrats, wonderful Erica. Now, Erica, you was focusing, your intervention is, what is it, error-rebel technique. Can I see the slides on error-rebel technique?
This one?
I don't know which one is on rebel, error-rebel technique.
You mean the intervention specification or this one?
Okay, so what is error-rebel technique?
Okay, it is a technique that it actually fits for 1 hour classroom session. Okay, so it begins by of course in the set induction you can do any kind of games or whatsoever. But in the presentation stage, you give the student a passage of grammatically correct sentences and then ask them to outline the grammar rules. So let's say if you want to focus on present continuous tense, then ask them to outline the rules of grammar of present continuous tense. Then after that, ask them to present it in order to ensure that everyone understands how the grammar rules are outlined. Okay. After that, in the production stage, we give them an error identification task, which actually they need to do it individually for a few minutes. After that, they need to discuss with their classmates. So in online session, they need to discuss with their groups. It's much more better to work that way. Okay, so after the discussion between them, they need to present it, or usually if teachers want to lead it, you can call the students like what I explained.
So basically what you are showing here, this is not an intervention. This is what you have done. This is an evidence of the intervention, right? So when you do AR, you have to have a page highlighting what is your intervention. Right? This is an evidence, right, of what you have done. Okay, 1. 2, who is your target students, your respondents?
My respondents?
Yeah, who are your respondents? Yeah?
Year 5.
Year 5. Alright, my next question is that, do you think the students have the maturity to do this error-rebel technique to the year 4 students?
Right?
Do you think they have the maturity to analyze the errors?
Yes, I do.
Alright.
Because from my first title itself, they are able to present it very well. So I proceed with the intervention.
Okay, next question. Now you mentioned somewhere towards the end of your presentation that the students were asked to work in teams, right? Breakout room. You only have 4.
Okay? Or 4 groups.
4 samples.
For each sample, they need to get into other teams. They are not working in the same group.
What do you mean? Other students?
Or the other students.
No. My question is, you only have 4 samples, right? But somewhere towards the end of your slides, you mentioned that the students were working in breakout rooms, right? They're working in teams. What teams are you talking about? Because there's only 4 of them.
I included them with the other students to work together. So in terms of teams, all 4 of them are separated into different teams. So actually, the reason why I did it that way is because I need some feedback from their friends as well about how they're performing in the groups. So from my observation and also the interview session with the other students, some state during the first session they are still passive, but others are started to incorporate. Others are started to participate much more better as compared to the last or previous session.
Okay, now this is where the problem comes in. Alright. Are the students your respondents as well? Your source of data?
Yes.
Where
for my in terms of my observation checklist, I didn't do it I didn't do it on my own only. I asked the students for their feedback on their friends' behavioral changes in the classroom and also I did ask my practical mate to enter my class for one time only to indicate the changes that she can.
This is what I personally feel. I got confused in between from the. I mean, you mentioned very clearly it's AR, but when you mentioned there's a lot of people involved, then I got confused whether this is basic quality or action research. Excuse me, I'm passing. When you include those people, it becomes it's a big question mark. When it is action research, you just stick to them only. Oh, there shouldn't be involvement of other students. And it means that you are doing this action research during class hour.
Yes.
Which is wrong. You have to take them out. It is a session on their own because there's only involving four of them. Now, next question is that how do you choose four of them?
Based on the pre-intervention test or the diagnostic test that I've given to all 30 people, and then I've chosen them based on the scores. So usually, these four students are those who presented low and moderate level of mastery test. The 5 Khadijah is actually a class with, we can say, moderate level learners. They are not weak learners. So these are the students who obtain the lowest score.
So why do you conduct this AR in class, whereby you wanted to improve this score only? Right. So I would like you to re-look into your your writing, your report writing of your AR. Yeah. Amanda.
Alright, thank you. That's awesome.
Okay, congratulations on your research. Okay, basically, how do you conduct the interviews?
The interview session were conducted online, but I did ask them to come to the school only one time because the parents are too scared to send their kid to the school. So we have a face-to-face interaction for interview session, and also the interview session which done online. But the interview session that done online was done after the classroom session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. To the end of the speech area of our presentation session this morning will now end. Congratulations to all presenters who have successfully presented their studies today. It is hoped that all participants will be very input including constructive comments and suggestions for improvement and refinement of their existing goals. I would like to thank the panel of assessors, lecturers, teachers, teacher training of ICT Campus Dr. Ismail, and fellow audiences who were willing to attend this webinar today. Before we end our session, I would like to inform Dr. That there will be a small gift attached for you, but the presents will be presented personally by the committee after this. So yeah.
Now. Okay, all right, fine.
So with that, thank you for presenting our Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Welcome everybody.